All right, I think that we are live. My name is Admiral Swart. I'm the commanding officer of the USS Dauntless, and this is the briefing with the Admiral for stardate -268252.1. I am the Admiral in question, and today's briefing we're going to be talking about what is a Starfleet officer. Before we get going, I just want to acknowledge people who've joined us here. I see you there, Petty Officer Grotius. Thanks for joining us today. If anybody else joins us during the course of this briefing, please give us a wave in the chat so we know what's going on. Of course, if you'd like to join us in the screening room for this kind of event in the future, you'd have to be an active duty member of the USS Dauntless. Follow the links on our YouTube, etc. profile, and you'll find a way to join our ranks if you're not already a member. So we do this in Discord and we stream it to YouTube where you can watch it later, and you can share it with your friends if you like. Lieutenant Fave, thank you for joining us. I see you in the chat there. All right, so let's get started. So what is a Starfleet officer? As with any explanation of something like this, you want to start with the dictionary definition, but of course it's a bit more complicated than that. So we're just going to go to the resource that we have at hand, which for all things Star Trek is, of course, Memory Alpha. And we're going to look at what Memory Alpha has to say about what a Starfleet officer is. Now, Memory Alpha doesn't have a page for Starfleet officers, so we're just going to look at the page for Starfleet and see if we can figure out what that means. So Starfleet, as we know in Star Trek canon, was the deep space exploratory and defense service maintained by the United Federation of Planets. Its principal functions included the advancement of Federation knowledge about the galaxy and its inhabitants and knowledge of all areas of study, both scientific, non-scientific fields and all others. Starfleet's ancillary duties included the defense of the Federation and the facilitation of Federation diplomacy. So, the fictional Starfleet is an exploratory service. As I mentioned in a previous video, it is envisioned as being the descendant of modern-day NASA and other similar manned spaceflight exploration organizations and agencies. Gene Roddenberry and other creators of Star Trek envisioned that over time, those agencies would eventually merge under the United Earth government and would form a single agency, the United Earth Space Probe Agency, and the manned spaceflight division of that was Starfleet, and that would eventually become the principal exploratory arm of that government. In the Star Trek future, they have also taken over a secondary function, which is being the military, the de facto military of the United Federation of Planets, and also they serve a diplomatic function as well. Now, the real Starfleet, Starfleet International, doesn't do any of those things. We are not an exploratory service, we're not a military, we're not even a diplomatic service. Our function is something quite different, and I'll do another video on exactly what Starfleet International is. But if you look back at the previous one where I asked the question, or answered the question, what is the USS Dauntless, I think we get some pretty good clues from there. So, in essence, a Starfleet officer, in terms of a real Starfleet officer, is a member of Starfleet. Specifically, I'm talking about Starfleet, the International Star Trek Fan Association, Incorporated, or one of its many chapters. There are hundreds of chapters. Most, if not all, of those chapters permit you to be a member of the chapter itself without actually being a member of SFI. The USS Dauntless is one of those. So if you are not ready to bite the bullet and become a member of Starfleet International, you can become a member of the USS Dauntless yourself. We here on the Dauntless, we put some limits on the advancement opportunities that are available to non-SFI members. That's just how that is. But we'll go into more detail about that in a future video as well. But in essence, a Starfleet officer is somebody who's a member of Starfleet. What about that word officer? So officer is a military term. It generally refers to somebody of higher rank, somebody who is responsible for commanding or administering the activities of the agency in question. But we also see in Star Trek canon the use of the term Starfleet officer as being more generic. We see somebody like Miles O'Brien being referred to as an officer, and he is not a commissioned officer, at least not in traditional naval terms. He is what we would call an enlisted man, or perhaps more commonly these days, a non-commissioned officer. He is actually referred to explicitly as a non-com in one episode of Deep Space Nine. So he is an officer in a way. He's just not a commissioned officer, and we tend to apply that term equally broadly here in the real Starfleet. You're a Starfleet officer whether you're a commissioned officer or not. That's just the general term for what for all of us. We are all Starfleet officers. Um, I'd like to get a bit more specific, but before I do, I just want to lay down some groundwork, just a sort of a disclaimer, if you will, which is to say, tell you what, we're done looking at memory alpha. Let me take that off the screen. There we go. Just us now. Um, One of the defining principles in Star Trek, and it's one that we hold very dear to in Starfleet in general, and here in the Dauntless in particular, is IDIC, infinite diversity in infinite combinations. And what that means in this specific context is that there is no one way of being a Starfleet officer. There are hundreds of chapters of Starfleet around the world. Each one has its own way of being, has its own practices, its own standards, its own values. And each one will have its own way of being a member, being a Starfleet officer. So when I talk about being what it means to be a Starfleet officer today, I'm talking specifically from the USS Dauntless perspective. Um, some chapters it's perfectly acceptable to be a relatively passive member. Some chapters are a little more than a Facebook page or WhatsApp chat group, and that's perfectly fine. There's nothing wrong with that at all. Infinite diversity and infinite combinations. But here on the Dauntless, we set a different standard. We ask more of ourselves and of each other, and today I'm going to go into some detail about what exactly that means, what it looks like. So when I talk about what it means to be a Starfleet officer for the rest of this video, I'm not going to keep disclaiming it every time. When I talk about a Starfleet officer, I mean a Starfleet officer on the Dauntless. If that's not something that appeals to you, there are plenty of other chapters to choose from in Starfleet, and I invite you to look through them all and see which one is a better fit for you. But in terms of the Dauntless, this is what it means to be a Starfleet officer. So when it comes down to it, what we're talking about is values. What is it that we value? What do we think is important? And I spend a lot of time thinking about this. I've been a Starfleet officer for a very long time. And the values that I'm able to crystallize out come down to three. I like the number three. I like boiling things down to three things. The first one is courage. It takes courage to be a Starfleet officer. And I don't just mean the day-to-day courage of being comfortable going out in public wearing a Starfleet uniform. I mean that's it takes some courage too, especially the first time. But that's not really the kind of thing I'm talking about. I'm also not talking about encouraging people to put themselves at the other extreme of that, put themselves in dangerous situations. I see Chief Kotzer has joined us. Welcome, Chief. Dangerous situations, that's not advisable either. So it's not necessary to put yourself in dangerous situations to be a Starfleet officer. But what it does require of you is to not allow your discomfort to be a reason to stop you from doing things that are important. So when I say discomfort, I mean all kinds of discomfort. That could be anxiety. It could be even an outright phobia. Other forms of fear. It could be physical discomfort, even pain. Pain in itself is a signal. Now, pain could tell you that you have been injured, and that's not ideal. We don't want people to suffer any injuries as part of their Starfleet service. But pain can also just be an indicator that you're pushing yourself beyond your limits. Let's say physically. If you are a physically active person and you like to go to the gym, then you are no stranger to pain. Pain tells you that you are succeeding. So pain in itself is not necessarily a reason to avoid doing something. And it takes a certain amount of personal fortitude, of emotional strength, and what I would describe as courage to power through pain or fear, anxiety, any other form of discomfort, and do things that matter despite those things. So I would say that that is a very important pillar of what it takes to be a Starfleet officer. The second pillar is similar to courage but distinct in important ways, and that is dedication. Dedication it requires a measure of courage to be dedicated to a thing, but it's more of a sustained effort. Perhaps a better way of phrasing it might be work ethic. Dedication is the emotional fortitude and physical fortitude to be able to keep doing a thing regularly, especially if that thing matters. So some things it's easy enough to muster up the courage to overcome an obstacle of discomfort one time, to donate blood once every couple of months, or to push yourself to run your first 5K run or something like that. That musters up a certain amount of courage. But to keep doing those things, week after week, month after month, year after year, that requires a different kind of fortitude. And I would describe that as dedication or determination or work ethic. And that defines a Starfleet officer as somebody who can be relied upon to do things that matter consistently over time. Not just once, not just from time to time, but regularly. And these are the kinds of values that we need in somebody who is a volunteer, somebody who steps up and does the work associated with operating a chapter of Starfleet, with operating an organization like the USS Dauntless, and for that matter, an organization like Starfleet International. The third leg seems obvious, but maybe it's not. In the fictional Starfleet, we have a requirement that every Starfleet officer has a love of exploration, because Starfleet is by default an exploratory agency, and that's primarily what it does. But here, the real world Starfleet, we don't really do any exploration. What we do is centered around Star Trek. So we require from Starfleet officers a love of Star Trek. That doesn't mean that you've watched every episode 20 times, or that you can quote lines of dialogue from the original series by heart or anything like that. That's not what I mean. It's more about an appreciation of how important Star Trek is in the world. It needs to be an important part of your life, and something that you're interested in exploring more. If there's a dedication to exploration, it's the exploration of Star Trek. Star Trek is such a colossal body of work. Even if you're just looking at established canon, that's not even including the various secondary and tertiary works that are available out there. Just exploring Star Trek canon is a non-trivial effort, and if you really love it, it's a labor of love. So let's go through those again. The three legs, the three important values that I think are relevant to being a Starfleet officer are courage, which is the fortitude to overcome discomfort, to do something that matters. It's dedication or determination or work ethic, which is the fortitude to keep doing something important over and over again, over time, consistently, in a way that people can rely on you. And the third leg is a love of Star Trek. It is the body of work that brought us here, that binds us in this organization. It's the thing. It's the reason that we adorn ourselves in these colors while we fill our homes with these artifacts. If you're not a lover of Star Trek, then frankly, it's a mystery why you're even here. I think that pretty much covers what I needed to say today. If you have any questions, I'm not seeing any questions in the chat, and that's perfectly fine. If you have any other questions that occur to you after the fact, or maybe you're only watching this later, I would encourage you to pop over to the YouTube channel. You can drop a comment there. If you're a member of the crew, just pop into our Discord. You can ask questions out in open channels, or you can message me directly. All of that is fine. I'd love to engage with you on this or any other topic. We'll be doing these mini seminars pretty much weekly, I would imagine, for the foreseeable future. So please keep an eye out both on Discord and our various other social media platforms for more updates and announcements regarding this and other activities that are coming up. That's it for now.